Let me tell you a little quick pre-story to our story. This was a fundraiser auction item. And you bid on the item and you got to have a discussion with me on any topic you wanted. And then it was 5 or 6 people and we sat around and we discussed it. So the topic was the Irish Celts, the pre-Christian version. And let me go ahead and tell you, I thought this was going to be a simple and basic walk through kind of history of pre-Irish religions. I was like, oh, great, another history sermon. And you guys are going to be so sick of me doing that. Then this group of people from the TUC family, because it ended up being all people who were either members of the congregation or had attended services here, they got together and they jumped in and they wrestled, grappled, and reflected. And I say that because that's actually when you do biblical or sacred text scholarly work, that's what they tell you, that you're wrestling, you're grappling, and you're reflecting on anything that's sacred, right? Well, this group got together, and without me having to like guide that at all, that's where they went. They went to the what's and hows of appropriation, appreciation, adaptation, and basic survival in the world. And they did this through the lens of Irish history. Like, I'm serious. Like, this was nuts. I talked about it with, Linda must have heard me talk longer than I'll be talking to you guys about how amazing the talk was. So you guys missed out. So basically, this became a deep conversation around what it means to live like you have some pluck of the Irish and survive in the world, no matter who you are, where you come from, or where you're going. So there's going to be some history, and then I'm going to talk about some of the really cool modern stuff. So I'm going to kind of jump back and forth. So stay with me. It's a little bit complicated to write a sermon about something so vast and so deep that these people were doing. And, you know, this is a really quick recap of the ever-changing wheel that is the march across time and what it means to be human. It's just being done through the Irish perspective today. So is everybody with me? Yeah, okay, stay awake. It's still a little history, stay with me. So, Pluck. I think if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. See, I told you, Mike, I'd mess it up. Mike handed me a remote and I'd still, I was like, this is why I needed a TA when I taught. So I want you to look at this map. These maps that we were dealing with, the time period we were talking about, they have arrows going in so many different directions. And several folks even commented that groups are not where they thought they should be. And not in this map, but if you look, like the Celts, as we think of the Celtic people, we're actually in what we would consider Germany now in some of these maps. Because these people moved all over. The idea of moving everywhere, that is not new, okay? And it was here at the start that I knew things in the discussion were going to be different. You see, right away, this group honed in on the idea that what made the Irish alike to other groups was a longer list than what made them different. Because again, when you're talking about comparative mythology, guess what you're doing? You're comparing. You notice that word is even in there. So you're looking at what makes one group alike, what makes them different. That's comparisons. That's how we study. We do this through archaeology, anthropology, the study of language. And now they're adding, and if you go to that website, they're adding DNA to update this map. This map is actually sponsored by the European Union, these maps are. So if you're really fascinated and you want to delve deep into get lost in linguistics, in history of the world and how people became who they were and what they were, go check out that website because it's all of Europe and it's a really cool website. You can play with the maps, you can look at your own DNA and compare it. It's a lot of fun. So, but we looked at it and they were like, hey, you know, the Irish peoples had more in common with the rest of Europe than what set them apart. And then we went on to talk about what set them apart, but that was the first thing they honed in on. And I was kind of like, oh, wow, this is not going to be a normal history lecture. They really saw what united them instead of what divided them. So, you know, it was kind of fun already. I was like, wow, that was within, I think, 10 minutes? For those of you who are in this room hiding out, pretending you weren't at this lecture, what was that? Within 5 or 10 minutes, I think, of us starting, you guys were like, but they have so much more in common with the rest of Europe than what makes them different. I was like, oh, God, I love this place. You guys are so awesome. So history teaches us that the Irish people celebrated 8 days as their most holy days. These days were centered around planetary movements and around harvest events in the cycles of their year. So here we are. Like this is what they had. Okay? These high days, which is how they're commonly referred, of the Irish people became a chance to talk about erasure. Like literally, I didn't bring that up.
They brought it up. Again, this is you guys who are amazing. How we know what these folks celebrated? From like detailed stuff through archaeology. But a lot of it was lost to the Catholic Church as they completely attempted to erase the old ways and replace them. Erasure is a powerful tool in what I refer to as the oppressive history handbook. Like when you look back on history, it's like they all had the same handbook. And that's one of those things that they did, was they erased history in an attempt to make it so it never was. So, because once something's forgotten, not only can you pretend it never happened, but the people who still try to honor it, you try to make them look like fools for doing so. That's erasure. That's making people oppressed simply by making them forget their own heritage. And I think it's cool that people in this congregation honed in on that. It's all about them. This is not about me. I'm just detailing what they wrote. So I think a big part of fighting back against erasure is finding ways to reclaim what they can. And this is a good one. So we know that they celebrated the equinoxes and the winter solstices, right? We don't know what they called them. We know what they called the other four, but for the Irish specific, we've lost what they called 4 of the days. We just know that they celebrated them. So it's kind of fascinating. But what I want to point out, the next slide, is that this is sort of the modern Wiccan. This is one type of modern paganism. I am not a Wiccan. Let me go ahead and get that out there. But what they did is they took the names from different cultures and a couple that they sort of made up going forward based on some other cultures. And they kind of merged them together in an attempt to unify modern pagans. And I think that's kind of a good thing. Like some people can get into the nitpicks of Reconstruction, like, oh, that's not good because I'm German and like we never did celebrate that. That's fine. Learn the new stuff. But maybe honor, and I think this is important, honor what is being done to preserve and hold space for the holy days that all pagans kind of generally recognize. Because one of the things that all these cultures had in common was that they all did have the 8 high days that were really close to each other. So I just wanted to point that out, that even though erasure happened, there's still kind of a fight against that, a fight to preserve and to hold it. And I think that's important. So I want to ask you, though, on the subject of erasure, what would you do if you saw something of this type of erasure happening in the world today? Like sit with this. These are my sit withs. You know, I always give you guys these. What would you do? Do you think you would even recognize this? Seriously. And if you did, how would you act? I'm not going to answer this for you. I'm a UU. You're supposed to figure that out on your own. I'm just going to ask you because that's what good UUs do. Another technique that was pointed out in our discussions comes from the Oppressive History Handbook is the replacement of an older thing with a new thing. While this also happened to the high days in some respects, hello, Easters and bunnies, we'll get there. Maybe some Christmas around Yule. Like, you guys all know this. This isn't new information, I don't think. In Ireland, it happened with one of their most powerful goddesses, right? So this didn't just happen to their holy days. This happened to their people they worshipped. I told the story of the Dagda, but our opening words, I called upon Bridget. Let me tell you something. What a complex history that is still literally fought about today. Like, genuinely, if you go to Dublin or you go to places where they have an epicenter of Irish heritage and history, this is something still hotly contested. Because we have 2 figures up here. We have the goddess Bridget and we have Saint Bridget. The Catholics made a saint, right? So the goddess of healing, she was a poet, she was a smith, which is really cool, female blacksmith. Come on now, that's just cool. She's also what's known as a triple aspect goddess because she carried around these 3 things, right? So she had all this great stuff. And maybe this triple aspect is what caused the Catholic Church to claim her and lift her up around, from the other gods. I don't know. We don't really know. This is what's still fought about today. I do know that the Catholic Saint Bridget of Kildare is matched so closely with the goddess that it's pretty obvious that there was some copying. that there was some replacing. If you go and you read the stories, the feats that made St. Bridget a saint are the same stories that the Irish told about the goddess Bridget long before they made her a saint. Like verbatim. And in fact, they still to this day share the same two main places of worship and the same holiday traditions. So you see that the St. Bridget's cross in the middle? Pagans still use that today. The Catholic Church still does that around February 2nd, which was her the feminine high day of Olmlic, which is what it's actually called in Ireland, or Imbolc is the modern pagan word for it. Just giving you a little fact to put in your pocket there. You can get it out at cocktail hour. But I think it's neat that we have this goddess, right? Because I am a pagan. So understand, I've declared my bias. I'm not a Wiccan, but I do believe in more than one God, right? This is just my spiritual path. So we have the goddess Bridget and Saint Bridget, right? And I think overlaying one habit over another is part of stealing, potentially, right? And the group talked about this. But for me, and what I did bring to the discussion, I'll take the blame for this one, is that I think St. Bridget knew, or who became St. Bridget, the goddess Bridget, I think she knew where people were going to need her. I think she kind of was like, you know what? Look at these Catholics, maybe they're going to win. So I think maybe she took on that mantle of sainthood to keep herself alive for her people. At least that's what I'd like to think. Like, I'd like to hear how you guys thought about it. But I think even if the St. Bridget of Kildare was a real person, she picked her name, Bridget, her holy name, because when you take orders, you have to pick a name. And she picked Bridget. So I have this moment where I'm like, well, maybe she was like an avatar, if you want to get deep into the woods there. I mean, but come on, she picked Bridget. And then she's credited with all the same things. So I would rather see this as Bridget finding a way to hide in plain sight, which is another Irish tradition, right? You got to hide in plain sight there. So she took these steps of like willing transformation to ensure she was able to be with her people. So maybe this makes me an optimist. I would rather see this as maybe her even getting one over on that oppressive group, but that's just me. Maybe I have that inside of me that I want to be a little bit like thumb my nose at something like that. I don't know. I'd love to hear somebody else, your guys' thoughts on this. I'm really open to that. So I ask you, do you have hidden rebellions in your life? Have you seen a hidden rebellion around survival potentially in your life? And if you don't, do you think that's a good thing? How do you think you could bring that up in your own life? Like, this is some deep stuff, maybe not. For me, I think it's amazing. I don't know. So, but we're going to move on from Bridget, as cool as she is, because I want to talk to you about the opposite of the hidden, which is a so in-your-face, bold set of lies that are told so often that they become an accepted cultural truth. Everybody laughed because I think half the room already knows from the slide what I'm talking about. The mixed bag of stories that is around St. Patrick are a complete mashup of things like that. This story features so prominently in modern Irish heritage, mostly here in the United States, by the way. It is completely different in Ireland versus how they practice it here, just if you didn't know that. But that it was included in our discussion. This has nothing to do with pre-Christian stuff, except that he was the second, by the way, not the first, one of the second Christian people to arrive in Ireland for study, right? And we'll get to that. But I had to include it in the discussion because it's such a prevalent cultural idea. And I think there was a lot of fun in the room because we just brought around just a ton of laughter around this. So the hill of pilgrimage for St. Patrick's Day used to be the hill of pilgrimage for Lu's Day. So Lu is also another Irish god. I didn't have time to talk about all the Irish gods. Okay, I'm trying to keep this under an hour. I think our discussion went 4 hours. Anyway, the Roman, this is another thing people don't know. The Roman British-born St. Patrick arrived in Ireland in 1431 and did his work somewhere between 431 and 470. Like the year 400, people. Like, we really don't have a lot of facts from this time frame here. But that's what he's credited with being, is that he died somewhere around 470. So this is not a lot of time here. And that's the accepted kind of accounts of St. Patrick. Again, like everything, this is hotly debated. I'm just going to keep putting that in there because I think you guys need to understand that history, once we know more, can change, which seems silly because history already happened. It's just our knowledge of history changes, just like that map with the arrows. And our talk was no different. So I want to talk about two myths around St. Patrick that were kind of fun that we talked about. We talked about a few more, but the two that we really focused on, and both of them are represented in this slide. You like that? So St. Patrick is credited with driving all the snakes from Ireland. All right, everybody take a moment. There is no evidence that snakes in Ireland ever were in Ireland. Like never. So many went on to say that this was a metaphor for him driving all the pagans/druids from Ireland. Which, by the way, didn't even happen. Like, this wasn't credited. Go back. Oh, no, that's Libby, never mind. But this wasn't even credited to St. Patrick until 1550. So, like, we're talking 470, 1550. So, kind of a little retroactive history here, but that's okay. And it is true that in Roman letters from the Roman Catholic Church, St. Patrick was noted as debating heavily with the Druids. This is probably not the true statement that he drove them away, okay? Because in St. Patrick's Day, the monks in Ireland, what they were really doing is they went to the edge of the world to commune with God. Hello, Ireland. That's why they were there. They went from urban centers to get away from the urban, because even then urban was bad, to commune with God. And at the world of this day, Ireland was the edge of the world. So that's why monks were originally there. So the idea that he was there to drive them out, conversion came later. So just keep that in mind. So the next item of discussion was that St. Patrick used the three-leaf clover to describe the Holy Trinity and thus was magically converting the Irish peoples to Roman Catholic Church. Now, the oldest credit for this story wasn't until the 1720s. So again, a little, let's tweak history a little bit, make it fit for our agenda. These St. Patrick stories, though, they open a conversation about how history gets tweaked and how it's written sometimes or rewritten with an agenda. So this is important sort of stuff when you read stuff. Like the first story you read is typically the one you try to keep with you. I'm asking you to be open-minded. So these stories, they get adjusted to fit the needs of the time. So I have to ask you this question. So this is really, like, I'm struggling with what's coming next because I was a little scared to put this stuff in here. It got deep after this in this discussion. St. Patrick has become a unifying symbol of the modern Irish people in Ireland and in the United States. He's become a symbol against oppression and as a central identity. So I ask, do you think that we should take that away? Or even, as many modern pagans celebrate St. Patrick's Day, as a scream to the world that they're still here, that he lost because they still exist. It's like this dual binary of arguments here, that the people of Irish tradition, they want to celebrate it because it's about Irish identity. And then there's this group of pagans who want to scream out that they still survive because of this over dominant idea. The four-leaf clover is supposed to represent the pagan. That's where that comes from, by the way. It's the luck that you survived. So that's this idea. So like a lot of pagans in the modern movement, they want to scream out that like anti-St. Patrick's Day on St. Patrick's Day. But then you still have this Irish people who are an oppressed people to this day. I mean, they just passed a law last year about Irish oppression from Great Britain. Like last year, that just happened, 2019. So they're still suffering from that. So do we take away St. Patrick as a centralizing, unifying identity of a people? Like, I don't know. Like this is the deep stuff they were talking about. I was like, oh my gosh, like honey some wine. So do facts do they really matter? Or are we potentially going to hurt the groups who already face adversity by stripping them away? Like, I know this is deep. Stay with me here. Like, I see you guys, like a couple of people blinking. Are you guys with me? Like, I'm going to grapple with this one for a while. And this, by the way, this isn't even as deep as it got. The next section here is where I was like, "Whoo, Linda." She's like, "Do it, Erien. Do it. They're ready." And I was like, "Okay." So I'm going to continue this trend into a final area of our discussion, and I want to share it with you. And that is a complex idea of what identity means. Yeah. And Libby, you can slide forward to 2 sets of slides here. Okay. Knowing where you come and know how it decides where you come from. Studies and professional mental health experts tell us that having a deep understanding of where you come from brings you peace and helps you live into your modern identity better in a more peaceful way. This is a real cartoon. This is one of thousands that was published. Okay. This is real. I didn't just, all right. Then there's the idea of how reclaiming historical identity is a strong step in the direction of deconstructing whiteness now. And we had this talk. The last hour of our conversation was around identity, sort of politics and identity thinking. The chance for people to own their own history is a chance for making space for the differences. Because you know it, the loss of their pre-white, modern American constructed, who is white, what is white, identity is one part of what has created a cycle of appropriation and oppression here in the United States. Yet, look at the slide, the Irish themselves were not seen as white in this country for many, many years. Yet somehow this group became folded into the homogeny of white people in America. And there's some amazing studies done on that, on how that happened. But with that folding, they lost much of what made them Irish, except maybe on St. Patrick's Day when they drank their green beer. But in exchange for that loss, they gained the power of white in America. I'm not going to say right or wrong on this, okay? Again, I'm not Irish. So this is me looking as another minority group looking at this. And this is complicated. And I gather my own pluck, and I'm going to invite you guys to wrestle, grapple, and reflect with me on this. Because this discussion got so deep, and like I said, I wasn't going to include it, and Linda's like, the congregation is ready. And I was like, okay. Because we discussed it, and we were like, she was like, this was good. I wish it was there. Like, she was like, oh, wow. So my next question to you is, just because you come from an oppressed history, does that give you an excuse to not take action in the face of other oppressions? Is this some sort of get out of work free card? Is it? I don't know. Or worse, are we in modern America competing in some sort of hidden oppression Olympics? No, I mean, well, you know, you laugh and it is funny, but at the same time, this is kind of what we're grappling with. Because a lot of Irish people know that they came into this country and were oppressed. And I've heard it and I've seen it. You've all seen it. Well, the Irish were oppressed too. The Italians were oppressed too. Then and it becomes like an oppression Olympics. And the idea that if your history is oppression, is it somehow okay for others to suffer because your family already did it? I don't know. Like to me, this was like, whoa. I was sitting in the library and I was like, holy moly. So I think these statements feel real to me in the modern age. I will continue to wrestle, grapple, and reflect. I think many of you probably will. I'm not arrogant enough to say that you will. I'm inviting you to do so. I want to live the best version of me, and I want to live in community with you guys as the best versions of you. So I think sometimes the real pluck is stepping up and saying, like, I want to grapple with this stuff. I want to sit in a room with people from different ethnic backgrounds, from different religious views, like we did, and feel your discomfort that maybe you've been inactive, or maybe you've taken action and you want to help others see that they could take action. I don't know. Again, I'm walking a fine line here. But I want to thank you guys for those who came for the discussion. First of all, you blew my mind. I have probably 4 more sermons that I could write on the stuff we talked about, but this is what I chose to focus in on because I think the congregation's ready to hear it. And I want to thank you for doing your work. And I want to thank you guys in the room and those of you online for listening to me as I did something scary and girded my loins to talk about what is whiteness. So a little bit. So thank you guys. And if anything I said sparks something in you, or the music has sparked something in you, I want you to maybe hold that in your heart or take that with you as you go throughout the week and set an intention to do something with it. Even if all it is to think about it. Sometimes we underestimate the power of just reflecting on something.